There's a specific experience that many dog owners have had, and that once described, almost everyone who loves a dog will recognize immediately. You haven't said anything. You're not visibly crying. You're sitting in your usual spot doing something ordinary, watching TV, reading, staring at nothing. You're not even sure yet that something is wrong. And then your dog gets up. They walk across the room with that particular quiet, unhurried deliberateness that is different from their usual movement. They come to where you are. They put their head in your lap or press their body against yours. And they look up at you. And that's when you realize you are sad. You just hadn't fully acknowledged it yet. But your dog had already arrived. What is happening in that moment, neurologically, biochemically, evolutionarily, is one of the most extraordinary chapters in the 15,000-year story of the human-dog relationship. And today, drawing on research from the University of Bristol, the University of Lincoln, Azabu University in Japan, and Goldsmiths University of London, we are going to tell that story properly, because it is far more profound than most people know. Let us begin with the question of mechanism, specifically how a dog detects your emotional state before you have expressed it through any visible behavior. In 2022, researchers at the University of Bristol's Waltham Pet Care Science Institute published a landmark study in the journal PLOS One, examining whether dogs could detect the specific biochemical signature of human psychological stress. The study design was elegant. Participants were placed in stress-inducing cognitive tasks, and breath and sweat samples were collected both before and after the stress induction. Dogs were then trained to identify the post-stress samples versus the pre-stress samples without any behavioral cues from the human. The results were unambiguous. The dogs identified the post-stress samples with an accuracy of 93.75%. A result that far exceeds chance and establishes, as the researchers stated explicitly, that dogs can detect a change in a specific volatile compound produced by the human body under psychological stress. The dogs were smelling emotion. The compound in question is related to the hormonal and metabolic cascade triggered by cortisol, the primary stress hormone, and its interaction with perspiration and respiration chemistry. When your body is under psychological stress, even before the feeling has been consciously processed, your biochemistry changes. Your cortisol levels rise, your breathing pattern shifts subtly, your perspiration changes composition, and your body releases a distinct chemical profile into the air around you. To your nose, with its 6 million olfactory receptors, these changes are imperceptible. To your dog, with their 300 million receptors, their olfactory cortex occupying 40 times more proportional brain space than yours, and their evolutionary history shaped specifically by the need to read other mammals' physiological states. This chemical signature is information. It is data arriving continuously from your body, telling them in chemical language about your internal state. Your dog knows you're stressed before your face shows it because your body is already broadcasting it in a frequency only they can hear. Beyond the biochemical detection, dogs have developed a second independent system for reading human emotional states: visual emotional intelligence. In 2016, researchers at the University of Lincoln published a study in the journal Biology Letters that provided the first empirical evidence that dogs can read human emotional facial expressions as meaningful social signals. The study presented dogs with photographs of human faces showing different emotional expressions: happy, angry, fearful, neutral, without any accompanying vocalizations or contextual cues. Dogs were never trained on these images. They had no prior laboratory experience with this type of stimulus. And yet, they consistently oriented differently to positive versus negative emotional expressions, showed behavioral approach toward happy faces and avoidance or wariness toward angry ones, and demonstrated pattern responses, suggesting genuine recognition of emotional content. This ability is not random or rudimentary. Subsequent research from the same group documented that dogs integrate information from multiple sensory channels simultaneously when assessing human emotional state. Combining facial expression data with vocal tone data with postural information, and, we now know from the Bristol research, olfactory chemical data. They are running multiple parallel streams of human-directed perception and synthesizing them into an emotional read that is, in aggregate, more accurate than the read available to any single one of those channels alone. Here is what this means for the experience of your dog appearing at your side when you're sad before you've expressed it. Your dog is not responding to nothing. They are responding to a complex signal that your body, your face, your posture, and your biochemistry are broadcasting continuously. And that your dog's multimodal emotional perception system is assembling into a real time assessment of your internal state. The signal is there. Your dog is simply the only one in the room with the equipment to receive it. Now we come to the dimension that transforms this from fascinating science into something that matters deeply. What does your dog do with this information? What does your dog feel when they detect that you're sad? This is the question that a team of researchers at Goldsmiths, University of London, addressed in a 2012 study led by Dr. Deborah Custance and Jennifer Mayer. The study placed dog owners in situations of apparent distress. The owner would hum quietly to themselves or cry audibly, and recorded the dog's behavioral responses. Critically, the study also used strangers rather than just owners in the distress condition to control for simple bonding behavior. The results were striking. Dogs oriented toward the distressed person, both their owner and the stranger, significantly more in the crying condition than in the humming condition. They approached, made physical contact, and showed lowered body posture and soft eye contact, behavioral patterns that researchers described as consistent with empathic concern responses in other species. The dogs were not approaching because they were excited or curious. They were approaching in a specific way with a specific quality of gentle, sustained contact behavior that reflected what the researchers interpreted as a response to perceived distress. The fact that this response extended to strangers, people the dogs had never met, is particularly significant. It means the behavior is not exclusively a bonding response to a specific individual. It is a more general response to the perception of another being's distress. Your dog is not programmed merely to attend to your emotional needs specifically. They appear to be oriented at a general level toward the distress of others. Dr. Brian Hare at Duke University's Canine Cognition Center, whose work on dog social intelligence is among the most cited in the field, has proposed that this sensitivity represents one of the most remarkable outcomes of the dog-human co-evolutionary relationship. Through 15,000 years of living alongside humans, dogs have not merely learned human behavioral patterns. They have developed what functions as a social cognitive specialization, a brain system oriented specifically toward reading, tracking, and responding to human emotional states. Your dog's empathy toward you is not metaphorical. It is the product of thousands of generations of selection for exactly this quality. The neurochemistry of what happens when your dog comes to comfort you adds another layer to this story, one that helps explain why the experience of being comforted by a dog is so reliably and deeply soothing. Research from Asabu University in Japan, published in the journal Science in 2015 by a team led by Dr. Miho Nagasawa, measured oxytocin levels in both dogs and their owners during periods of mutual gaze. The kind of soft, sustained eye contact that happens when your dog looks up at you from your lap. The results produced what Dr. Nagasawa described as a remarkable parallel to the mother-infant bonding mechanism. In human mothers and their newborns, mutual gaze triggers a reciprocal oxytocin loop. Both parties experience an oxytocin rise through eye contact. And this hormonal exchange is one of the primary biological mechanisms of mother-infant bonding. The Asabu University study found that the same reciprocal loop occurs between dogs and their owners. Both the dog and the owner showed significant oxytocin rises following mutual gaze, and the degree of the rise correlated with the strength of the bonding behavior between them. Oxytocin is not a metaphorical bonding hormone. It is the neurochemical that reduces anxiety, increases trust, decreases stress reactivity, and generates the felt sense of safety and connection that we associate with being loved. When your dog looks up at you in a moment of sadness and you meet their eyes, you are both receiving a dose of the neurochemical equivalent of being held by someone who loves you unconditionally. This is not poetic exaggeration, and it is physiology. And it helps explain why so many people report that being with their dog in a moment of grief or difficulty provides comfort that no human, however well intentioned, can quite replicate. The dog is not better at empathy. They are running a different biological program, one that produces in both of you a direct neurochemical response that bypasses language and thought entirely. It is chemical reassurance, and it is real. There is a final dimension of this story that requires acknowledgement, one that speaks not to the science, but to what the science means for how we understand our dogs and our responsibility toward them. If your dog can detect your emotional state with the sensitivity we've documented, if they are continuously reading your biochemistry, your facial expressions, your voice, it's your posture, then your emotional world is not private from them. When you are chronically anxious, your dog is living in a field of anxiety. When you are grieving, your dog is sharing the grief through chemical and emotional contagion. Research from the Royal Veterinary College in London has documented that dogs who live with chronically stressed owners show significantly elevated cortisol levels themselves, a phenomenon researchers call cortisol synchrony, where the hormonal states of bonded individuals begin to mirror each other over time. This has important implications. The relationship is not one directional. Your dog is not a comfort device that absorbs your distress without cost. They are an emotionally permeable being who shares your world at a level of biochemical intimacy that most humans don't achieve with each other. Their well-being is connected to yours in ways that are physiologically documented. The most meaningful response to understanding this is not anxiety about being sad around your dog. It is recognition of the depth of the relationship and gratitude for the extraordinary quality of attention, sensitivity, and unconditional presence that your dog brings to it. They come to you when you're sad because they feel it, because they care, and because they have been shaped across thousands of generations to orient toward your pain with exactly the quality of quiet, sustained, non-judgmental presence that is, in your hardest moments, exactly what you need. They don't need you to explain. They don't need you to be okay yet. They just need you to know they're there. And they will stay there for as long as it takes. Your dog's ability to detect your sadness before you've expressed it is not mysterious. It is the product of 15,000 years of coevolution, documented by research from the University of Bristol, the University of Lincoln, Azabu University, and Goldsmiths. A body of evidence that points consistently to the same conclusion. Your dog is a precision instrument for your emotional state, running multimodal perception systems across chemical, visual, auditory, and behavioral channels simultaneously, oriented by evolution and individual bonding toward your well-being as their primary concern. When they come to you quietly, put their head in your lap and look up with those eyes. They are not performing. They are not reacting randomly. They have received your signal, processed it through systems more sophisticated than any technology we have built, and arrived at your side with the one response they are equipped to offer: presence. Loyal, warm, non-judgmental, neurochemically therapeutic presence. Has your dog ever found you in a low moment before you'd said a word? Tell us your story in the comments. Every single one of those stories matters.